Welcome. We are going to do something a little different this time. We're going to talk November and December energy just as we wrap up and um, wrap up 2025. So, um, November is kind of, and I want to put both of these together because I feel like there's kind of a synergy in both of those energies as we wrap up the rest of the year and start looking forward to the new year. So November we have a couple additional alignments. We have Uranus retrograde in Taurus, Jupiter retrograde in Cancer, Saturn going direct in Pisces, and in December we have Neptune going direct in Pisces. So for November, I think some of the important focus is looking at depth of emotion, looking at the intensity of our emotions, like those highs and lows, um, and looking at really the truth of what we are dealing with on such a large scale. We have come into a space where we have been conditioned to be reactive versus proactive, and it is wreaking havoc. I think it's causing so much issue on how we choose to make moves, how we choose to bring things together. Um, and so it's going to be super important for us, as you know, by December to start like setting boundaries and figuring out where we need to put maximum effort into things. There's going to be a space and time where we kind of, and we've been doing this for a minute, but we've been kind of going back and forth between Neptune and Aries and Neptune and Pisces because when Neptune retrogrades a bit as it is about to finish its Pisces era, we go back and forth between Pisces and Aries. And so there's this space where we see um, hyper religiousness, and even just some religious psychosis, really, where we're seeing that kind of flesh out. So we went into this space of enlightenment and everybody had an awakening. And then all of a sudden, there was this switchback that said, oh my gosh, all of that awakening was demonic. We got to go back to doctrine, super religious doctrine. And then there's still a piece where people were like, well, wait, let me kind of question that a little bit because I found some things that work for me as I start to see the truth of some of the programming of the doctrine. But then there are people who are holding on tight to a lot of that doctrine because it has afforded them a lot of the perceived privileges that they have. And so we're still going to kind of tussle with that a bit. We're still going to kind of have some issues where um some of that is concerned, but this is going to really be a space where you're going to have to decide what works for you, and do more of what works for you, and what's good for your life and your home. And I think what's important about having that understanding is that, like, you don't need to go around and convince other people, right? And so if you have found a doctrine that works for you, go do that in your home. Like, it's totally okay. You don't have to spend time arguing with strangers, trying to convince strangers that what you're choosing for your life is going to be helpful. Just do what's good for you. We'll talk in the love scopes and moon scopes conversations separately about the Venus alignments that are coming up. and the full moon and new moon alignment. So definitely check out the love scopes and the moon scopes for both November and December. But we start off November with the full moon in Taurus on November 5th. And then we move into the new moon in Scorpio on November 20th. Both of those are talking about finding a natural flow for your intuition and just finding some mental clarity and balancing out like emotional wisdom. um, Venus moves into Scorpio on November 6th, but then it also transits into Sagittarius on the 30th. So we're going to have a lot that has to do with like love and community in the month of in the month of November. Like there's just a lot that has to do with like love and community and how we are choosing um our relationships. So that's going to be, we're going to go a little deeper into that in the November moon scopes. Um, Sagittarius, the sun moves into Sagittarius on November 21st. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So we're talking expansiveness, optimism, but also in this day and age, we want to get some direction on with social interaction, social activism, social activity. Um, we're also looking at how we can all start to really come together. What does community look like? Community isn't just me and you coming together to fight one perceived enemy and then go back to our corners. Like, no, we're supposed to figure out how to fuse together in this space and continue to move forward with that kind of energy. Uranus in Taurus, Uranus it goes retrograde in Taurus on the 7th. Um, when Uranus is direct in Taurus, you see us kind of breaking free from like rigid traditions in a space of like conservatism. When it's retrograde, we need to really examine any sudden shifts we've made and adjust and make changes to our values. So, just like I was talking about that Neptune in Aries, um, going back and forth between Neptune and Aries and Neptune and Pisces, this that Uranus and Taurus retrograde kind of comes in and says, hey, like, let's really look at these values and let's really set a stronger foundation for what we say, our values and standards. On the 11th, Jupiter goes retrograde in Cancer. Direct in Cancer, there's a space of like this hypersensitive reactiveness, um, maybe giving like really pointed and excessive care to certain situations. But in retrograde, we need to discuss how our feelings and how being unbalanced more so in our feelings can make us a bit more reactive versus being proactive, right? So it's like we're coming up on the back end of things trying to manage it versus like going in feeling whole and healthy and then managing things from that perspective. On the 27th of November, Saturn goes direct in Pisces. Um, this is a space where we need to learn how to find middle ground in any of our extremes. We want to make sure that we're taking care of home and ourself with the same care that you worry about others. We spend a lot of time doing very external things, not understanding that if we gather the internal, it strengthens everything that you do externally in community. So what comes to mind with that is that old school adage to make sure that you sweep around your own front door, clean up your own stuff first. So as we move into December, we have the full moon in Gemini on the 4th. New moon in Sagittarius on the 19th. Both of those are talking about conflicting emotions and deep yearnings and this need for emotional security. Um, Venus moves into Capricorn on the 24th. So that is a space of learning how to set some emotional boundaries with things. Boundaries are a way of keeping yourself safe, but it also helps to keep the other people safe around you. It's like everybody knows that they're on the same page. So, and we'll talk about that in the love scopes about how that affects our relationships. On the 10th, Neptune goes direct in Pisces. So that's that faith and that mysticism. We're going to see that shift back into hyper religiousness. Um, and people, you may see people coming back and clinging to religion in a way that's a bit obsessive. Let them do what they do. You walk your own walk. I think that's what's most important here. Um, the sun moves into Capricorn on the 21st at 10:03 a.m. So Cap season is going to be a space of making sure that we're putting forth our maximum efforts, and that we are dealing with things with a space of patience and perseverance. So as we're like wrapping up the year, this is kind of energy where we need to focus on collective consciousness. It's something that we've needed to focus on pretty much the entire year, as we go into the second half of the decade, but we're constantly questioning what brings us joy. How do we properly demonstrate our affections and our passions? And I think as well, just understanding that, like, because you like a lot of stuff we have issue with because we go too hard out the gate and we're a bit obsessive with it and we're overdoing it. And then it's like, oh, reactive, I got to pull back. And oh, none of that stuff worked. No, it's not that it didn't work, it's that you were doing too much in the first place. So, what would happen? How would things work out if you kind of paced yourself out the gate? If you actually examined things properly and looked at things properly and put the proper standards into place, like, how much better would things work out for you if you manage things like that? And that's kind of where we got to get to. We've been programmed to just overwork things and jump down people's throats and not see the whole picture, and that causes issues in our relationships and how we relate to others because we're really ready to just go too hard all the time and say, this is me putting in effort. When in actuality, it actually takes effort to research, it takes effort to know what you're talking about. A lot of the effort needs to come beforehand and not after. And so that's really where, a huge pivot that we have to get to at this point in time is really being more proactive about how we address relationships, how we um, start relationships, how we see each other, how we see ourselves um, as well. That part is going to be super, super um, important coming up. So, especially when um, in this space of community, we're going to have to be charged with truly, truly taking care of one another and what that means. It's not just us taking care of one another because things are falling apart. It's like, no, we need to take care of each other long term because this is the way it's designed to be. So I want you to just kind of take some of this with you. How can you implement any of these ideas in your day to day, in your personal surroundings? How can you implement some of this thinking and being into your day to day?